celebration turned into a nightmare, a woman full of life broadcasting her joy to the world. Then, in an instant silence, what really happened on that chaotic July 4th night in Fort Worth? And why is the case still raising more questions than answers? She was more than just a makeup artist. Latasha Hymond was a mother, a businesswoman, a friend, and a fiancée. Her story wasn't supposed to end this way, but on that fateful night, amidst the fireworks and celebrations, her live stream captured something chilling. Did she unknowingly record the moments leading to her death? And why did it take weeks before authorities made their first arrest? Stay with us as we break down the events of that tragic night and uncover the search for justice in a case that left an entire community in shock. Before we talk about the tragic events of that night, let's take a moment to truly understand who Latasha Hymond was. Because too often, victims of violence are remembered for how they died rather than how they lived. But Latasha was so much more than a headline, more than a crime statistic. She was a mother, a businesswoman, and a woman who had just begun a new chapter in her life. To those who knew her, she wasn't just Latasha. She was Shay, a vibrant, loving, and talented woman whose energy could light up any room. She had a gift, not just in her profession as a makeup artist, but in the way she made people feel. Whether you were a longtime client or someone she met in passing, Latasha had a way of making you feel seen, valued, and beautiful. Her journey wasn't always easy, though. Like many entrepreneurs, she built her career from the ground up. In 2018, she took a leap of faith and launched her own makeup business, Slay by Shay. What started as a small venture soon became a trusted name in the beauty industry. She wasn't just skilled with a brush. She had an eye for transformation. Her clients didn't just leave her chair with flawless makeup. They left feeling empowered. That's the kind of artist she was. And she didn't stop there. Her business was more than a brand, it was a movement. She used her platform to inspire others, encouraging women to chase their dreams, to take up space, to believe in their own beauty. Her social media was filled with messages of self-love, positivity, and personal growth. But her biggest role, the one that meant the most, was being a mother. Latasha was a devoted mom to her 22-year-old son. Their bond was unbreakable. She raised him to be strong, independent, and to always strive for greatness. They were more than just mother and son. They were a team. Every success she had, every milestone she reached, she did it for him. And just when it seemed like life was falling into place, she found love again. Her fiancé, Tommy Howard, had been through heartbreak before. He had lost his previous fiancée to cancer. But when he met Latasha, something changed. She brought him back to life. She was his light, his second chance at happiness. Together, they were building a future, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a fresh start. And that's exactly what July 4th, 2024, was supposed to be for Latasha, a fresh start. Just days before, she had finalized her divorce. She was free, happy, and looking ahead to a future she had worked so hard for. But life is unpredictable. And sometimes, just when you think you're stepping into a new beginning, fate has other plans. On the night of July 4th, Latasha Hymond wasn't just celebrating the holiday. She was celebrating her freedom, her independence, her new life. She went live on Facebook, laughing, smiling, soaking in the joy of the moment. But what she didn't know was that she was also broadcasting her final moments. What happened next would leave an entire community shaken. A celebration that started with fireworks and laughter would soon turn into an unimaginable nightmare. And Latasha? She was caught right in the middle of it. July 4th, a night of fireworks, family, and freedom. Across the country, people gathered to celebrate. The air was thick with the scent of barbecue, the sound of music, and the crackling of fireworks lighting up the night sky. In Fort Worth, Texas, the annual block party in the Como neighborhood was in full swing. It was a tradition, a time for the community to come together, to laugh, to dance, to forget about their troubles, even if just for a night. Among the hundreds gathered on Castleman Street that evening was Latasha Hymond. For her, This night was more than just a holiday. It was a personal celebration. She had recently finalized her divorce, closing a difficult chapter in her life. And with her fiancé, Tommy Howard, by her side, she was looking ahead, ready to embrace a new beginning. She wanted to share her happiness with the world. So, like many of us do in our best moments, she pulled out her phone, opened Facebook, and hit live. The live stream starts with Latasha's signature energy. She's smiling, laughing, talking directly to the camera as music blares in the background. "I'm free, y'all. Divorced and happy," she says, beaming. You can feel her joy through the screen. She's dancing, spinning the camera around to show the crowd behind her. People are waving, dancing, having a good time. It's the kind of moment you'd expect to see on any 4th of July. Pure, unfiltered happiness. But if you watch closely, there's something else happening in the background. The energy in the crowd is shifting. The camera catches glimpses of fireworks, some being set off safely, others being shot into the air recklessly. The sound of popping and crackling fills the night. And then, something odd. Sparks fly near a parked police cruiser. Fireworks are being thrown, not into the sky but toward buildings, toward people, toward officers watching from the sidelines. It's chaotic, but at first it seems harmless. Just a few people getting carried away with the excitement. Latasha keeps talking, laughing, celebrating. But behind her, the tension in the crowd is growing. Voices are getting louder. People are moving differently. A feeling, almost impossible to describe, starts creeping in. Something doesn't feel right. As the minutes pass, the block party feels less like a celebration and more like a powder keg. One spark away from an explosion. More fireworks are being thrown, not into the sky, but at people, at homes, cars. The police are there, but they aren't stepping in. They're watching, waiting, maybe hoping it'll settle on its own. And then, the live stream catches something unsettling. In the distance, cars start doing donuts at an intersection. Engines revving, tires screeching. The crowd surges forward, cheering, phones out, recording. It's a spectacle, a moment of excitement, but then, a shift. The excitement turns to something else. Aggression, restlessness. Latasha keeps recording. She turns the camera back to herself, smiling, joking. But there's a flicker of something in her expression. A moment of hesitation, as if she, too, is sensing it. What she didn't know, what no one knew, was that the celebration was minutes away from spiraling into something far more dangerous. The energy wasn't just excitement anymore. It was tension, unspoken but heavy, thick in the air, waiting to erupt. And then, in the blink of an eye, it did. It happened so fast, most people don't even register it at first. A loud pop, almost blending in with the fireworks. Then another, and another. The difference is subtle, but if you're close enough, you can hear it. This isn't the echo of fireworks bouncing off buildings. This is sharper, faster, a different kind of sound altogether. Latasha's live stream keeps going. The screen is shaky now, moving frantically. Screams pierce the night. People are running. The celebration turns into chaos in an instant. In the middle of it all, her phone is still recording. She tries to move, to make sense of what's happening, but she doesn't get the chance. Because in that moment, the bullets find her. A sudden jolt. The phone shifts. A sharp intake of breath. And then, silence. The live stream stops. In just a matter of seconds, everything changed. A woman who was laughing, celebrating, sharing her joy with the world, was gone. But how? Who pulled the trigger? And was Latasha the target? Or was she simply caught in the crossfire of something much bigger than anyone realized? As investigators scrambled to make sense of the chaos, one thing became clear. This wasn't just another night in Fort Worth. This was something else entirely. And the search for answers was just beginning. One second, it's a party. The next, it's pure chaos. At first, many in the crowd don't even realize what's happening. The sound of gunfire mixes with the fireworks, creating confusion. People are still cheering, still laughing, until the screams start. And then the shift is immediate. Fear spreads like wildfire. People are running, pushing, scrambling for cover. Some dive behind cars, others drop to the ground. In the chaos, cell phones are still recording, capturing the moment the celebration turns into a nightmare. Latasha's live stream ends abruptly. No warning, no goodbye, just silence. Witnesses later describe it as a blur, a series of rapid, deafening gunshots. No single shooter but multiple, bullets tearing through the crowd. More than 100 shell casings would be found at the scene. But in that moment, none of that mattered. What mattered was survival. Marcus Martin Jr., just 19 years old, is hit in the back. He was running, trying to escape the gunfire. He never makes it out. Latasha is struck in the chest and arms. She collapses. The woman who was celebrating her freedom, her fresh start, is now lying motionless on the pavement. People are screaming for help. But the gunfire doesn't stop immediately. It continues, rapid and relentless, until finally silence. When the shots finally stop, the block party is unrecognizable. People who were dancing minutes ago are now sobbing, checking on loved ones, trying to comprehend what just happened. Sirens fill the air. Police and paramedics rush in, but for Latasha and Marcus, it's too late. They are pronounced dead at the scene. The rest of the victims, those who survived, are rushed to the hospital. But the real question remains: who fired the shots? And why? In the days that follow, the community is left reeling. 2 people are dead. Several others are wounded. And yet, no one is in custody. Multiple shooters. Multiple guns. But no arrests. What happened that night? Was it a targeted attack? A fight that escalated? Or something even more disturbing? The investigation begins. But for Latasha's family, the grief is just beginning. The morning after the shooting, Castleman Street was unrecognizable. Crime scene tapes stretched across the block, the echoes of last night's chaos still lingering in the air. Spent shell casings littered the pavement, a stark reminder of the violence that unfolded just hours before. But the most haunting part? The silence. No more music, no more laughter, just grief, just questions. And for Latasha's family, one question stood above the rest. Who did this? The Fort Worth Police Department wasted no time launching an investigation. And what they found was overwhelming: over 100 shell casings, scattered across the area. Different calibers, different weapons, which meant one thing: multiple shooters. The block party had been filled with hundreds of people. But now, in the aftermath, witnesses were hesitant to talk. Fear gripped the community. Fear of retaliation. Fear of speaking up. Fear that justice might never come. Detectives reviewed security footage, social media posts, and cell phone videos, hoping to identify suspects. But the chaos of the moment made it difficult. The scene had been too crowded, too frantic, too unpredictable. And so the days passed, then a week, then 2. Still, no arrests. Latasha's family wasn't just mourning, they were demanding answers. Her cousin, Pastor Felton Jenkins, spoke publicly, calling for witnesses to come forward. She was loved by everybody, he said. Somebody knows something. And if you know something, it's time to speak up. But still silence. Was it fear? A lack of trust in the system? Or something deeper? For 2 weeks, it seemed like justice was slipping away. But then, a break in the case. On July 18th, police announced their first arrest. 21-year-old Tadurick Rogers was taken into custody and charged with murder. His name was now attached to one of the deadliest 4th of July shootings in recent Fort Worth history. But here's the problem. Police had already confirmed that multiple shooters were involved. Rogers wasn't alone that night. So who else pulled the trigger? And why weren't they behind bars? Authorities assured the public that the investigation was still ongoing, that more arrests could follow. But for Latasha's family, that wasn't enough. They didn't just want justice. They wanted the full truth. One arrest, but many unanswered questions. Was Rogers the mastermind? or just one piece of a much larger puzzle? And would the other shooters ever be brought to justice? As the investigation dragged on, the community refused to stay silent. Vigils were held. Calls for change grew louder. And for those who loved Latasha, the fight was just beginning. When a tragedy like this happens, the pain isn't just felt by the family. It spreads through the entire community. The people who knew Latasha, the clients she worked with, the neighbors who saw her smile every day, they all felt the loss. And in the days following her death, the grief was overwhelming. At the corner of Castleman Street, where laughter and celebration had once filled the air, a makeshift memorial began to grow. Flowers, candles, handwritten notes, photos of Latasha, smiling, forever frozen in time. People came one by one to pay their respects. Some knelt in silence. Others whispered prayers. And some just stood there, shaking their heads, still unable to believe what had happened. "She didn't deserve this," one woman said through tears. "She had so much life left to live." For Latasha's fiancé, Tommy Howard, the pain was unimaginable. Just days before, they had been planning their future together. Now that future was gone. In interviews, he spoke about her kindness, her laughter, the way she could light up a room. "She saved me," he said. "After everything I'd been through, she gave me a reason to love again. And now, she's gone." Her son, just 22 years old, was struggling to understand how his mother, his biggest supporter, his role model, could be taken from him so suddenly. No child should have to say goodbye to a parent this way. But here he was, faced with a reality he never imagined. And then there was Pastor Felton Jenkins, her cousin, a man who had spent years preaching about the dangers of gun violence, about the need for peace. But now that violence had reached his own family. And this time, his words weren't just for the congregation. They were for the world. "How many more lives have to be lost?" he asked. "How many more families have to bury their loved ones before something changes?" Latasha's death wasn't just a personal loss. It was a wake-up call. The Como neighborhood had seen violence before. But this was different. 2 people dead, multiple injured. And for what? The frustration in the community was growing. Residents spoke out, calling for more safety measures, stronger community policing, and real solutions to prevent gun violence. At a vigil held in her honor, people didn't just grieve. They spoke up. One by one, they took the microphone, sharing their anger, their heartbreak, their fear. "We're tired," one speaker said. "We're tired of burying our people. We're tired of lighting candles instead of celebrating birthdays. We're tired of waiting for justice that never comes." The message was clear. Something had to change. But even as the community called for action, there was one problem. People were still afraid to talk. Witnesses had been there that night. Hundreds of people had seen what happened. But many were staying silent. Some out of fear. Some out of distrust in the justice system. Some because they didn't believe anything would change, even if they did come forward. This isn't just a problem in Fort Worth. It's something we see over and over again in communities affected by violence. People want justice, but they also want to protect themselves. And in cases like this, fear often wins. Police continued to urge the public to come forward. "Somebody knows something," they said, "and we need you to speak up." So what happens now? One man has been arrested, but there were multiple shooters that night, multiple guns, and yet no new names, no new leads. The people responsible are still out there, walking free. And Latasha's family? They're still waiting. Will more arrests be made? Will the silence finally break? Or will this case, like so many others, fade into the background? Another name, another statistic, another family left without closure. The search for justice isn't over. And for Latasha's family, it never will be. Not until every single person involved in her murder is held accountable. Latasha Hymond should still be here. She should still be laughing, still creating, still living the life she worked so hard to build. But instead, her family is left grieving, her community is left shaken, and the people responsible for her death? Many of them are still out there. We've walked through the moments leading up to that tragic night. The joy, the celebration, the sudden chaos. We've seen how quickly life can change. How in just a matter of seconds, someone full of life can be taken away. And yet, even with all the evidence, even with witnesses, even with her final moments captured on camera, justice still feels out of reach. And that raises a question: why? The arrest of Tadurick Rogers was just the beginning. But one arrest isn't enough. Not when multiple shooters were involved. Not when bullets were flying from different directions. Not when the community is still afraid to speak. So we have to ask, will more arrests be made? Will those who pulled the trigger ever be held accountable? Or will this case, like so many others, slowly fade into the background, buried under a pile of unsolved crimes? The painful truth is that for many families, justice is a promise that never gets fulfilled. Cases go cold. Evidence is lost. Witnesses stay silent. And the people responsible move on, knowing they got away with it. But should that be the end of Latasha's story? Because this isn't just about Latasha. It's about every life lost to senseless violence. Every family left without answers. Every community trapped in a cycle of fear and silence. We have to ask ourselves, what will it take to stop this from happening again? Is it stricter gun laws? Stronger community policing? More support for neighborhoods at risk? Or does the real change start with us? With the people who know the truth but are too afraid to speak? Because silence is a killer too. And as long as people refuse to come forward, as long as communities stay quiet out of fear, justice will always be out of reach. If you're watching this and you know something, if you were there that night, if you heard the whispers of who was involved, if you saw something, anything, there are families waiting for answers. There is a mother, a fiancé, a son, all left with an unbearable void. And you have the power to help them find peace. Crime Stoppers is taking anonymous tips. No names, no risks, just the truth.